Hello and welcome to the Camo Grind, a series where I analyze every weapon in Advanced Warfare to help you complete every camo challenge by giving specific strategies, loadouts, and more, including ranking every weapon variant in order of usefulness based on several factors to give you an idea of what you should use and what you should redeem. I don't, however, just make this stuff up. My advice and opinions are based on thorough testing, in-game coded stats, and of course my own experiences in using these weapons and weapon variants, of which I own many, to complete every marksman challenge and earn every royalty camo. Today's episode is on the NA-45 grenade sniper rifle. Definitely a unique weapon and one of the harder sniper rifles to master because it is a bit quirky, but if you're using it correctly, it's very effective. I'll only do this very rarely, but one thing I'd like to remind everyone of is if you are a recurring viewer of this series, I'm sure you're very tired of that annoyingly long intro. I am very aware that long intros suck, but it's there to introduce this series to any new people who may find these videos in searches. If that's not you, that's why I include two annotations right at the beginning of the intro in the top right to help you navigate the episodes quickly. Or if you're on mobile, just remember that the intro is exactly 30 seconds long, so that should be pretty easy to remember and skip. That's also why the annotations that are at the end of every video that have the previous and next episode will link you to 30 seconds into that video, not the very beginning. I totally understand that once you've seen it once or twice, you really don't need to see it again, so hopefully all those annotations make it very easy to skip. Enough talking though, let's get into the variant ranking system. Now of course I did base these on a lot of factual things like the coded stats, the time skill at all ranges, and of course my own testing and playtime experience, but at the end of the day, these are opinions. Don't take this as fact, it is just a guide. I have the Ravager as the best variant for the NA-45. This is one where maybe not everyone will have the same opinion, but you have to believe me, the damage buff it gets is really impressive. First of all, the Ravager is the only NA-45 to increase the explosive range by about 15%, which doesn't sound huge by itself, but you also get an increase in the max and min damage values, changing the max damage from 130 to 150, and doubling the min damage from 15 to 30. Now those are a lot of numbers and they're hard to visualize, but when you compile all that together, the Ravager has something like a 70 to 80% larger blast radius, which is crazy. And since that's a radius, if you know some math, you'll know how the area of a circle is calculated. It involves squaring, so this variant basically ends up tripling the explosion area that will result in a kill. A very, very good variant. Stack that with Danger Close, which you'll pretty much always want to have when using the NA-45, and you've got something reminiscent of Modern Warfare 2 on your hands. You can easily clear out entire objectives and rooms with really the only thing standing in your way being Flak Jacket. All that being said, it doesn't come without a nerf. Your fire rate is reduced from 750 RPM to 400 RPM, which is quite the drop. Obviously, this isn't a fully automatic weapon, so not the biggest deal, but if you're used to spamming the trigger as fast as you can and getting those 2 shots downrange, you really can't do that as quickly with this weapon or you'll end up oversampling it and jamming it. 400 RPM is lower than most people's trigger fingers, while 750 is pretty safe, so you have to get used to how fast you can fire this weapon to avoid jamming it. If it helps, I'll play a bit of sound so that you know what 400 RPM sounds like. So you basically have to emulate that when you shoot. If you try to shoot any faster than that, it just won't work. 400 RPM is a shot every 150 milliseconds, if you're curious. Still very fast, but not as spammable. Still, this variant is definitely worth it in my opinion. The explosion radius is insane. I was lucky to get this elite pretty early on, and at first, I didn't know if the stat bar saying that it increased damage was a placebo or not, because that happens quite often in this game, or if it was actually helping, because the true coded gun stats weren't really public knowledge yet. But it turns out it certainly is helpful, and I don't think I've ever actually had to use the base NA-45. I've always had the Ravager, so because of that, I've always thought the NA-45 was super powerful. Meanwhile, tons of people suggested it for this series and hate using it, and that difference in opinion could be as simple as this variant just being so good. So if you have the Ravager, I would suggest you use it. I think we've covered that. Now the NA-45 High Explosive, I'm assuming, or HE, is the second place variant here. It is the only other NA-45 to increase the damage, which I like, although this one is pretty minor. It only changes the minimum explosive damage from 15 to 30. None of the other crazy stuff the Ravager did, but that's still a great buff that helps your one-shot kill explosion radius, and the HE doesn't really have much of a nerf. It only increases your idle sway amount by about 20% and your idle sway speed by about 15%. For some sniper rifles, that would kinda suck, but with the NA-45, you're really not going for long-range accuracy. You're most often just going to be spamming nearby surfaces. Finally, as the third variant, we have the NA-45 Sharpshooter, which is an interesting case. On the surface, it looks pretty bad, or at least underwhelming, but in reality, it is nothing but upside. It says +1 mobility, -1 handling, which would imply that you get a boost to your movement speed. Yes, you do run faster with this variant, but a 10% increase in your sprint out time, which would really not be worth it if you even noticed those minor changes. But in reality, this variant should say +1 mobility, +1 handling, because that's what it actually does. You get the 1.8% movement speed buff and a 10% decrease in your sprint out time, meaning it is 10% faster. Maybe that's a little mistake, maybe it's an intentional loophole like they seem to like to throw in there sometimes, but either way, they still haven't patched it. So it's not like this is a game-changing variant in any way, but there's literally no reason to not use it over the base variant if you have it. Now, the M and Hurried are both variants that I think are viable. I won't go very in depth here, but basically they both increase your rate of fire. I think you'll never have a problem with the 750 RPM of the base variant, but in case you have an amazing scuff and the world's fastest trigger finger and you find yourself somehow oversampling the base NA-45, you could consider these variants because they both increase your rate of fire. The M brings you up to 857 and the Hurried brings you up to 1000, and they both have fairly minor nerfs like a small change to idle sway or sprint out time. But here we are at the base variant, so everything after this, the Feint, Agile, Exact, Screamin, and Rover, while they do still have pros and cons, I think the cons outweigh the pros, and I don't recommend using them at all. You can just redeem them for XP. I won't explain them all, but if you disagree with something and you want to take it up with me, I do encourage you to do so. I will briefly cover the other elite, the Screamin, because we all like to think elites are pretty good in some way. Well, not always. The Screamin's +3 fire rate brings you up to 1200 RPM, and I ask, why? If you're using this variant, you've surely got some crazy modded controller hacks, because no human would ever take advantage of that fire rate buff. And the Screamin not only lowers your sprint out time by 20%, it also lowers your max damage from 130 to just 100, making your one-shot kill radius very small. Like I said, if you are the 1% who needs a higher fire rate than the base variant, just opt for the M or the Hurried. There should really be no scenario where you reach for the Screamin. So that's my opinion on the variants of the NA-45. Now we move to the camo challenges themselves. It starts off pretty standard with 80 long shots, although long shots are a bit tougher with the NA-45 compared to something like the AK-12 that we covered last episode, ironically, even though the NA-45 is classified as a sniper rifle. So the same long shot tips that I've given before still apply. It is all about locations, maps, and playstyle. I did make a guide on this once, and it's a pretty old video now, but is still valid. You can watch that for extra long shot help. But the NA-45 is a pretty unique case. One way to go about the challenge would be with hardcore mode. If you're playing hardcore, you can forget all about the explosions and use the NA-45 like a regular sniper rifle, because you will be able to get one-shot kills. A direct impact from the NA-45 projectile does exactly 30 damage, and that's how much health you have in hardcore. Or if you're not a hardcore fan, you can always play something like Domination or Momentum, where you can set yourself up around an objective at a long shot distance, and fire your primer down on the flag and wait until someone hops on there, then just fire the catalyst and boom. Pretty easy long shots there. This challenge shouldn't be too bad as long as you're keeping it in mind. If you're rushing around like usual, you definitely won't get this challenge passively like you would with some, but if you're actively working towards it, you should be okay. So hardcore, objective modes, and all the regular long shot tips still apply. You also need 80 headshots, which is a bit of a pain, but thankfully there is a 3.5 times headshot multiplier with this weapon. You will be getting one-shot headshots every time, no need to play hardcore for this one. You just need to try to get headshots. Unfortunately, no cool tips to give there. Next, you need not just 5, but actually 15 bloodthirsty medals in total. If you have the Ravager variant, I don't think you'll have much trouble with this. If you're running around in Momentum with this thing, you'll probably get a few bloodthirsties every game without thinking about it. It's a pretty good weapon, but if you really hate using this thing, remember there is the trick where you can get your first 4 kills with any weapons, it doesn't matter, then get the 5th kill with the NA-45 to earn that bloodthirsty medal and get the point towards the challenge. So you could set up a class like this. If you want to make it easy mode, just use any weapon you're comfortable with, have the NA-45 as your secondary, and once you've counted out the first 4 kills, switch to the NA-45 for the 5th, and you'll be good. Next, we've got 5 double kills, and this is where the NA-45 shines compared to the other sniper rifles, because you do need 5 double kills for every sniper rifle. But it's definitely easiest with the NA-45 because this thing was built for that. Basically, just use danger close and spam objectives. People will probably hate you, but it shouldn't take long to get this challenge. And last 2 camos, we all know these very well. Just spend some time without perks or attachments. Going without perks is actually a bit annoying because danger close is very helpful in buffing this gun. If you're going to play hardcore for the long shot challenge, I would try to overlap that with the no perks challenge because you won't need danger close as much for that. But that about wraps up the challenge guide for the NA-45. I quite like this gun. I don't mind the challenges. But a lot of people requested this gun be covered, and while I could be wrong, my running theory is that they maybe don't have the Ravager, and while that isn't really in your control, my final bit of advice would be if you're going for all the weapon camos and you have something else you can do first, I would do that and see if you can get the Ravager before completing these challenges. That's sort of how I did my challenges whenever I unlocked a cool elite weapon. I'd do the challenges for that weapon next, so I wouldn't be suffering through using a base weapon for a while when there's an elite weapon that would make it a lot easier. That would kind of suck if you unlock the elite after you're done all the challenges. But there you have it, the NA-45, definitely an interesting concept for a weapon, and I wish you the best of luck with the challenges. Next episode, we'll be taking a look at the S12. Due to some recent suggestions, it was moved up a couple places. If you have a specific weapon or two you'd like to see covered either for the camo advice or the variant ranking, don't hesitate to suggest it and I'll add it to the list. If I see multiple people requesting one thing, the priority on that weapon will just get bumped up, and that's how we will choose what weapon will be next. So I hope you are more knowledgeable about the NA-45 now than you were 12 minutes ago, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.